Welcome, everybody.
Yes, welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today on our little webinar presentation with our friends from IBM, Alan and Barry. Anyway, so what more importantly, however, Barry and Alan are going to share with some very pertinent information about staying ahead of attacks with IBM, fast recovery and data security. I think it's a really good time to talk about sort of locally managing such things now that we can see one of the big three has had some major problems overnight. Was quite amusing. I was bouncing off with Kelly, who also works with us, also runs the business here at Acquire, and we're like, okay, so what TV streamer is down? Yeah. Oh, we can't watch that one. Can't watch TVNZ. Can't watch Neon. Um, I was happy, of course, because Apple was still alive. But that aside, sad day for Amazon. Good day for everyone else. Um, I should let Barry get going because he's got a busy day ahead of himself. Introducing Barry White to talk to us about IBM's fast storage recovery and data security.
Excellent. Thanks, Simon. So just very briefly, I'll let Alan introduce himself when I hand over to him. I'm part of IBM's New Zealand-based storage technical team. So I've been with IBM for a very long time, working in storage, all of that time coming from development, and now part of our kind of technical pre-sales team. So we're going to cover off, as Simon said, some our kind of point of view of how to build data resilience basically into an environment. I'm just going to, because I'm in a hotel room in Melbourne at the moment, I'm not sure on the Wi-Fi bandwidth, so I'm going to turn my camera off while I present just so that the presentation comes through unabated. So let me just do that and minimize that. Okay, so as I say, this talking about the kind of IBM point of view around building operational resilience. Now, it's clear that ransomware attacks are not slowing down. We're seeing almost every day another large company, another small company being attacked. And there's some interesting statistics that over 50% of New Zealand's small and medium businesses have also suffered some kind of either ransomware or data exfiltration type attack. So these are here. They're happening all the time, and it's something that we need to try and build resilience into our infrastructure to be able to cope with. Classic example, and this one's slightly close to heart. Not the new pink Jaguar, but my daily driver is a Jaguar, and you may have seen that back in 31st of August. They were attacked, which meant they had to bring all of their manufacturing assembly line down. So that was down, and I think it's only just last week that they actually got back up and running. This was so bad that even kind of local dealerships couldn't actually diagnose cars. Now, as one of my friends says, if you own a Jaguar, it's very important to be able to diagnose what's wrong with it, which he found amusing when I was presenting this a couple of weeks ago to bring up. But literally, their diagnostic tooling that plugs into the car is connected to the internet, connected back to their home base, and because of the shutdown, they couldn't actually diagnose anything. They had been looking at adding insurance cover for such events, but they hadn't actually picked up anything. And so they're going to have to bear the costs of this. Now, I think the projected loss has kind of gone up from that. I think it's about £6 billion in revenue that they've lost from not being able to produce any cars for kind of almost 8 weeks. But it's not just the kind of initial, obviously that's affected Jaguar Land Rover, but it's the suppliers to JLR that have also been impacted by this. So a lot of them obviously being relatively small companies around the Midlands of the UK, such that the government in the UK has had to actually bail out those smaller companies as a result of this. Now, again, just last week, when looking at this, they were seeking another 4 billion. So this was an Aussie newspaper that I'd cut this from. So that's 2 billion GB pounds, in addition to obviously the lost revenue. Now they're going to have to pay that back as they actually start to reproduce the cars. So this was, in essence, all of those smaller suppliers who are almost living hand to mouth, they've suddenly lost their main kind of supply that they're putting into. They're not being paid for the parts that they had been supplying to them, and so it's not just the company or the organization. It's the kind of potentially global impact that that has to knock on effects to other organizations as well. The other piece that is hugely on the rise is what's referred to as data exfiltration. So this is kind of the data breach side of things. This is again what you see happening on a very regular basis. There's been lots of cases of this locally, and the most obvious one recently was with Qantas back in June, where they had 6 million customer records stolen. Now, this was through their loyalty program. So the the route that the attackers got in here was through a third party. So this was essentially a travel agent who had access, obviously, to the information, to the database with the records and the customer information, email addresses, their Qantas number, all of those kind of things were stolen through that third party because they had access and they hadn't been securing their infrastructure correctly, and they'd got in and basically stolen that. The net of that was a rough 10% price drop in their shares. So that's roughly 1.6 billion Aussie dollars off of their market cap, kind of overnight from the point of this being reported. Since then, there's a class action suit going against them on behalf of all the customers who basically had that data stolen. So there's various types of attack. There's the obvious one of this is down, we've encrypted your data, you're being held to ransom, but there's more and more it's around data being stolen. And even with encryption these days, people are stealing the data, even though it's encrypted data, in the hope that in a year's time, 2 years' time, maybe they have access to some kind of quantum computing level that means they could actually decrypt that data at a later date. So even encrypted data is not fully protected, depending on the type of encryption, obviously, that's being used. Now, on top of that, obviously, the other reason that we're hearing about this a lot more is that there are regulations in place that say you have to report these things. So I would say, obviously, over in Europe, they're probably the most kind of furthest ahead with these regulations. So the DORA, the Digital Operation Resilience Act, basically makes CIOs and CEOs personally liable if it's seen that the due diligence has not been done, and they haven't secured their infrastructure as they should be doing, then they could be held personally liable with fines up to 11 million. And that is a personal fine. That's not a business fine. That's coming after the actual people whose job it is to make sure these things is not happening, or at least the organization is as secure as possible. There's obviously cyber security agency over in the US starting to pick up these things. We have obviously the financial services kind of the various organizations around Australia and New Zealand that are ensuring things. So these regulations are here. So people have to report them within a certain amount of time. Now, it's much like the GDPR type regulations in that, well, we're here in Australia, New Zealand, we're not bound by these things, but it's going to be a case that these things are brought to us as well. It's going to be, oh, you've got European employees in your organization, therefore, essentially a bit like GDPR, you are actually held liable to these things as well. So IBM every year for the last 20 years has produced a data report around the cost of a data breach. This makes for interesting reading. It kind of works out an average cost for each kind of data breach. It actually goes out and interviews all of the people involved in recovering and involved in the actual attack itself to get some real kind of actual statistical data. I think it's 37,000 interviews over the last year to produce the latest report. Now, AI is obviously the latest kind of buzz. And so the problem with AI is what is that actually doing with your data? Who has access to that data? Where are you placing that data? In order to train models and to build AI infrastructure, it lives and dies by the data input to it. And so we're seeing, and this year it was called the AI oversight gap. But if we just look at the kind of that statistic on the right, after a breach, 49% of the organizations that were breached are spending aggressively in the area of security. Now, I don't know about you, but I would rather be well, let me spend some money now and not be breached if I'm going to have to spend the money anyway after a breach. And it really is, it's become a bit of a kind of catchphrase, but it really is the when this happens to you, not if it's going to happen to you. So the AI stuff, the piece there is this shadow AI. Just as we've talked about shadow infrastructure or shadow cloud usage, people going and going, well, I've just put my credit card in and I've got some more AWS storage, or maybe not at the moment, but essentially going in there and using some infrastructure for a small piece of project that isn't sanctioned by the organization, that isn't really known about, and doesn't have the observability into the organization. The same goes for this concept of shadow AI. Is somebody grabbing a whole bunch of your kind of unstructured data, putting it up into some chat GPT or whatever kind of tooling is there to do legitimate kind of work. But now, what are the terms and conditions of you uploading that data to a third party? Do they now own that data? Do they now have a copy of that data? And so the additional cost of a breach, something like an additional kind of 8 to 10% of the cost of a breach is coming along from this concept of shadow AI usage. And on the opposite side of that, by using AI in the security aspects, that 4.4 million, these are all US dollar, obviously, kind of averages. Roughly 50% of the cost of a breach can be reduced by implementing some forms of AI in your security environment. And so, essentially, when it comes to storage infrastructure, we need what the industry is kind of referring to as cyber storage. So what is cyber storage? Well, one part of it is around using some of the kind of frameworks that are in place. So the NIST framework, again, a US based National Institute of Standards and Technology, has put together essentially this kind of 6 phase or this 6 portion piece to implementing cyber storage. So it's around obviously identifying, and that identify can be identifying threats, identifying users, usual credential type stuff. It's around protecting an environment, making sure that obviously you've got clean data in a protected vault or kind of repository. The area around AI is being kind of boosted up by this detect phase. So the earlier that we can detect things and the more layers we have where we can detect, the quicker we can find something and then we can head into the respond phase. So having an environment where you can test things before you recover them. Should the worst happen and it's been a ransomware attack, that data has now been corrupted. So you need to go back to a last known good copy. But also, how do you respond to the public? How do you respond to the government if it's a critical infrastructure type environment? All of these things are being put in place with a governing around it as well. So it's no good just saying, yes, we can do that, and yes, we do this. It's kind of like the DR testing or the backup testing. How frequently do you do this? How often are you actually governing that all of what you've said you're going to do is actually happening? And that governing piece is a key piece that is very difficult to today to kind of generally achieve without some kind of help. And so we kind of put this into, we pick off the kind of 3 things around the storage aspect that are critical here. So it's around protecting the environment, and that's around data resilience and compliance, essentially, ensuring that the right stuff is being backed up. It's around early threat detection, so helping to detect things as early as possible in the environment and having a multi-layered approach, which we'll come back to in just a moment. And then finally, around that recovery phase, making sure that you can restore as quickly as possible, but also restore a copy that you know to be as good as possible. At the point that it was taken or soon after that point, have you validated that that is a valid copy? It's going to work, first of all. It's actually usable by the application, but also that it's clean and it's free of malware to the best of your knowledge at any given time. So IBM essentially is delivering cyber storage with our flash system products and also a suite of capabilities that we refer to as Storage Defender. So I'm just going to delve in very quickly. Flash system is a whole topic all in itself, and we could spend a whole kind of webinar talking about that. But I just want to pick off the one piece that's very relevant to this and is absolutely unique in the industry. So IBM implements or builds its own solid state devices called flash core modules. These are made in conjunction with our partnership with Micron. Alan's got one in his hand there. These are industry form factor standard 2.5-inch SSDs, but they're not your ordinary SSD. These things have a large FPGA in there rather than running a little small CPU, a little ARM processor, as most SSDs do. And that means that all the firmware we write to run the device is basically turned into gate logic on there. So it's all running at hardware speed. It's essentially a full hardware path running encryption, running compression. So we can do compression in there up to 3-to-1 data reduction on the drive for zero performance impact. We do all of the smarts of managing the flash. These are cost effective. They generally are cheaper than industry standard SSDs. But something we added about 18 months ago into these is this ransomware threat detection. Now, you might think it's too late by the time the data is getting to the drive, or it's difficult to understand the context of the data. And yes, okay, it has to get to the drive for us to be able to detect it. But as I've said early on, the earlier you can detect something, the less data gets compromised. So by looking at sequencing and addressing patterns, looking at the payload to see if it's been encrypted, looking at the changes in compression statistics, changes in the read and write throughputs, the IOPS of the drive, and a whole bunch of mathematical statistical analysis that I don't even pretend to comprehend, basically can within 60 seconds detect that we think there is a ransomware or a corruption event is happening to this device and report up. So better 60 seconds than waiting for hours or days to go, oh, this application stopped working. So the solution as an overview, all of those drives in the flash system are basically reporting up every 2 seconds. They're reporting a summary of data up to the flash system. We have a machine trained or a machine learning model in there, an inference engine that has been trained on what does it look like for all of these statistics and characteristics when a typical ransomware attack happens. Now, this is very different to just you going and encrypting your data. There's very specific ways that these attacks are deployed. And so within 60 seconds, it can detect that something has happened. And then we'll pass an alert up to our Storage Insights Pro SaaS-based management interface. Now, in the release that's coming at the end of this year, we will be directly raising these events on the system after our Storage Insights has told us, yes, this workload is stable. So as I say, it's about 18 months since we introduced this. The model has been retrained with data coming from end users. So one of the nice things, we pass that data up, we build a big data lake of all of this analysis inside Insights, and then we can basically say, okay, let's retrain the model based on that. The model is now 98% more accurate than it was when it was first released, when we trained it internally. So this is ever evolving. We're now at a point where we truly trust this model. We don't want to cry wolf. We don't want to raise false positives. And so as a new workload is ingested into the system, there'll be a learning phase. And then Insights will tell the Flash system, okay, this is past learning. We're now good. Now you can go ahead as soon as you detect one of these and raise an alert internally. For now, while it's in that learning phase, then we can pass on those through webhooks to your Siemens SOAR, to your SOC based team, and to part of this Storage Defender capability that we have known as this Data Resilience Service. The idea being is that you can then take actions. So we have the ability to create immutable snapshots on the Flash system. We would generally recommend people turn this on and they run it on a daily basis, whether it's every 6 hours or every 12 hours on the system, keep them there for 2 to 3 days. That's your safe place to restore back to. And it's instant restore because it's on the same storage. Essentially, this is just incremental deltas that are being recorded away so that we can recover back quickly. As I say, with this new release, now that the system will be raising these events internally, you can request that it just automatically takes one of those at the point that it detects that alert happening. So even without going any further and even without building any more infrastructure, just by having a flash system as your storage device, instantly you've got some level of detection built in there, and you've got a level of protection built in, even if you don't go any further into the kind of higher levels of Storage Defender. So, speaking of which, it is made up of kind of multiple kind of pieces. So the data resilience service, that's the thing that we could forward those alerts to. You can kind of think of this as a SIEM SOAR for your storage environment. So this is your governance. This is where you set up your policies that says, okay, I want to have some degree of scanning. I want to have some degree of protection against application groups. So I'm going to set up an application group. This is my crown jewels. I want the best level of protection. This is my policy I'm going to set to that. Make sure I'm meeting that policy. So this is how you can prove and govern that the requirements you put in place, the kind of SLAs you put in place, are being met. Very easy to use. It can go out and discover what's in your environment. It can automatically set up these protection groups for you, and then you can define how frequently you want to be testing things, mounting things. It's basically a way to build something that we often refer to as a clean room type environment or an isolated recovery environment. Come back to that in a moment. We also have other pieces as part of Storage Defender. So obviously Flash System is a separate product, but it can tie into Defender. And some of the pieces for managing Flash System are around copy data management. So this gives you a way to set, again, other SLAs around how many snapshots you want to take on the system, whether they're safeguarded. It can do kind of VM level integration. It can do application or database integration to take either application aware snapshots or crash consistent snapshots. And then part of that is a product we have called Sentinel, which is doing scanning of those copies. So you've gone to the effort of making that copy. Let me go and actually scan that. Let me look for any dormant threats living inside there rather than active threats that we're looking at on the SCMs. This is something that may be a piece of malware. It might be some rogue code that somebody's put in, depending on the application that it's scanning and it understands. The best way to describe this, someone said to me, think of it as breaking down an application and its data into its genetic structure, and it's looking for essentially genes that have gone wrong, or essentially pieces of malware that somebody has put into there that isn't normally part of the genetic structure of that application. We've got archive for long-term kind of tape type archive solutions, and we can also use storage virtualized to bring other vendors' storage under this Storage Defender environment. And then we've got the kind of backup environments. So we have another SaaS-based portal, the data management service, and that can both combine the backup of our traditional backup, so Storage Protect. Any of you that have been around IBM for a long time, I refer to that as the artist formerly known as TSM, because everybody knows what TSM is. So that's Storage Protect for traditional kind of backup, supporting tape as a long-term cold archive, and then our modern data protection with Data Protect based around the partnership we've done with Cohesity. So that is Defender in a nutshell, very high level, but how would you actually go about kind of putting all of this together, and what is the kind of value that we get from this? So I mentioned that we need to have this multi-layered kind of ransomware detection idea. So we've got the storage-based detections, that's the FCMs, looking at those at the low-level things that are happening at the storage. One of the other things that comes with that data resilience service are these host-based sensors that are looking at file system and file access patterns. So these are fast, these are active threat detection. These are looking at that level to say, okay, this is happening right now. We think there's an attack underway. We've then got the scanning side of things. So we've taken snapshots. We're going to run Sentinel against it. We've also got backup scanning. So either in that Data Protect or Storage Protect, we can run third-party tools or they have built-in tools themselves, looking at metadata trends, looking at, okay, you backed up twice as much today as you did yesterday. That's unusual. Maybe someone's changed a lot of your data. Is this potentially a threat that's running there? And then it's around building that isolated recovery environment to bring the backups back into as things change, zero-day events happen. We now know about those. We can go back and recheck those things on a fairly regular basis and have somewhere as a safe place in the event of needing to do a recovery, somewhere to bring those copies back to before you restore them back into your production environment. So speed and depth. That's the whole point here is we want to be doing things fast and we want to be doing it to a great depth as well. So putting all of that together and saying, okay, what would that look like if I was doing, if I put everything in place, what does that look like? So we've got our production workloads. They're all sitting there running in various places, typical databases, kind of systems of record. We've got VMs, we've got container workloads, some cloud workloads as well. So we talked about that safeguarded copy. Obviously, other vendors can plug in here if they have snapshots, immutable snapshot capability on their system, but this is on the primary storage. This is your quickest recovery mechanism because it's there right on the primary storage next to the actual production data. Then we have the backup environments. So we've got the data protect and the storage protect. And again, you can create immutable snaps or immutable backups within those environments as ways to protect. Again, other backup tools are available and plug in. This is that protect phase. This is around protecting the environment. We got the sensors, so active threat detection, looking at the production workloads running against the file systems there and looking for anomalous transactions happening at a file system level. I should put anything in the kind of blue box. These are all part of the Defender capabilities. Each one of them can be licensed and used individually from a common kind of license structure. Sentinel. Mentioned that. That's doing that anomaly scanning, that genetic anomaly scanning. We can run that against the safeguarded copies. We can run that also against some of the backup copies that have been done, or there are other tools out there, third-party tools such as Predator, who we partner with heavily as well to actually do that backup level anomaly scanning. Then the idea of this isolated recovery environment or this clean room and kind of vaulting environment. That would be somewhere that basically you have a set of VMs or a set of kind of small set of infrastructure within a kind of air-gapped type environment within your network where we can recover these things into and actually run the application against or run whatever tooling is available to validate the data for that application. The point being is in the event of an attack, that would be where you'd recover to first. You'd scan it again, you'd validate that it's clean, disinfect it if you need to, if you find malware in there, so that you can do the safe restoration, the safe and fast restoration back into production. Then we have that Defender data resiliency service sitting off to the side. The point of that is to orchestrate and report on everything that you're doing, either in your isolated recovery environment, your clean room, across the safeguarded copies, across the backup structures, and also discovering into those production workloads. We've got our FCMs out there doing their analysis. They're looking for those ransomware detection events. They will be reporting up through storage insights. They can alert into DRS. DRS can then be tasked with taking further action based on that. Similarly, the Defender sensors are going to be alerting into DRS. In the future, DRS will also be picking up from Sentinel, from these other scanning tools, giving them a method to hook into DRS to report back on the quality. For now, essentially everything can report through your SIEM and SOAR. And so this is the kind of the high level or the kind of gold-plated point of view blueprint. The point being is we can help try and isolate where you maybe have gaps in your coverage. We have something called a SARA, a Secure and Resilience Assessment, that we can come in with Aspire. We can come in and help you essentially understand where you might have gaps in your environment. What are you doing today? What aren't you doing today? That is a no charge option for us to come in and do that. And then maybe it highlights, well, you're not doing any scanning of anything. Well, maybe we look at adding Sentinel in. So you don't have to be doing everything here, but the more you're doing, the better prepared you are and the better chance you have for your operational resilience stance. So I think at this point I'm going to hand over to Alan. But before we do that, was there any pressing questions or anything come up in the chat, Alan, that we needed to cover off, or are we good?
No, look, they look pretty quiet,
Yeah.
and I mean, it was a good flow. I mean, are there any questions while we've got Barry on the call? Oh, okay, look, we'll just kick on. I mean, look, the good thing is contact the Acquire team, have a chat to any one of them, and obviously myself, Barry, we're here in New Zealand. We're lucky to have Barry as a master inventor at IBM. So yeah, we can arrange a time to follow up with you. So yeah, I guess that's at that point.
Right.
Look, I've sort of asked to steal the last word. Barry, do you have
Yeah.
anything else to finish off?
No, all good. Sorry, I have to run away next meeting, but thanks everyone for attending, and I'll leave you with Alan.
Thank you, Barry.
Cheers.
Thank you, Barry.
And the funny thing is for the most part, Barry, he's jumped off the call, so he won't get the joke. But he's the substance, he's the steak of the meal, and I'm sort of more like the sizzle. So my name's Alan Nehemia. I am the storage sales lead in New Zealand. Can any older systems be upgraded with these new drives? Adrian, I'll come back to that one for you because it will depend on which systems you've got, but that's a good question, which we'll come back to. So look, the last thing I wanted to do was to cover off a little bit around OpenShift, just a little bit of a taster, because we know that things like virtualization is coming up. Many of you on the call will be accustomed to the discussions that are happening with Broadcom and VMware and what that might be implementing for your system. So a little bit of a sort of a Friday funny on a Tuesday. But a lot of people are looking at different options, and this is really bringing us to a bit of a fork in the road around what you want to do, whether you want to go from VM to VM or whether you want to actually take that leap into full modernization and try to look at a platform which can accommodate both virtualization and obviously modern container sort of hybrid applications. So we've got a view on that, and I just wanted to make sure that I could leave you with this as a sort of a takeaway. But IBM looks at virtualization as an OpenShift approach. We have a software-defined capability that supports OpenShift, operates wherever OpenShift runs. But the cool thing is if you've got your IT bingo chart sheet in front of you, we also support container application modernization and AI. So, you know, whenever I mention AI, I always get a good mark and helps with my KPIs at work. But AI is something that is of increasing interest. So our Fusion platform is something I wanted to bring some awareness about. But to give you in 2 slides, what is Fusion? So Fusion is a software product, as I sort of talked about. As you can see at the bottom of this slide, it operates wherever you run your OpenShift. So whether that's in Rosa and AWS, obviously, as Simon pointed out, maybe not today. In Azure, Google, IBM Cloud, obviously in your own VMware environment on-prem. Now, I call this the thin blue line, and it's a thing that adds what we call operator-based data services to enrich the capability of your OpenShift experience. And a good example would be virtualization. So those people that are looking at virtualization, they want the VMware-like experience. Fusion offers the data services that enables OpenShift virtualization, or OVE, to actually see a data storage, whether it's external or internal, and that brings a whole lot of benefits and VMware-like capabilities like live migration. Now, I'm not going to go into the detail. I can again spend a whole webinar on that, but we also have a HCI appliance. So this is something to look at if you can gain benefit and value from the data services added to OpenShift, but you also want the services or the capabilities of a platform that is opinionated, tested and operates from the first week it's actually installed. And if you didn't like the marketing slide, there's the Lego version slide that I made. So my last slide, which is if you're running an OpenShift environment, most people have seen it as a bit of a build your own approach. And for the most part, you're managing a very complex environment. You're patching it, and you're leveraging things like ODF, and you're using CSI drivers. For the most part, this was built on containers, but obviously with Broadcom making it commercially, let's say, uncomfortable, people are looking for alternatives. So OpenShift with Fusion software-defined storage, that thin blue line I referred to earlier, that's going to give you a whole bunch of capabilities and I guess richness and depth of data services, which can help you deliver both containers and virtualization. And of course, if you're going whole hog, and again, I'm going to get some more points here, Simon. If you want to run some AI and you need some GPUs, well, our Fusion HCI does all of the things. It operates both virtualization, it operates containerization, but it also has the capacity to add GPUs into the mix. Now, hear me, GPU does not make an AI. People that are saying that doing that are just a little PDF page behind in the actual reading, and they need to catch up. You do need a AI operating environment. And I know, Simon, your team has been across the Watson X product. So we have our version of an AI operating environment that you would put into a contained environment like OpenShift, but we can talk about that at another time. Ultimately, that's it from us, Simon. There's a couple of contact options there. If anyone wants to follow up with us, but more importantly, we love the Acquire team. We've been working closely with them. I've known them since the inception, and they are a fabulous team. Perhaps if you do have any questions, follow up with your Acquire contact and get in touch, and maybe book a meeting, and myself or Barry or both can come in and talk at a little bit more depth around this. Simon?
That's great. Yeah, it's great. Thanks, Alan. So IBM's like the great performer that not many customers adopt. It's, I think, largely because IBM spent a lot of time way up there in not the clouds.
Yeah, the enterprise.
Just the enterprise cloud. But the offerings that are available for the SMB market are very strong. Watson, of course, very strong focus on governance and data protection, which is paramount in AI. You don't see many other vendors really talking to that as well as IBM does. Coupled with the IBM storage story, it's rock solid. That's why the big guys use you. Is that not right?
Yeah, look at the big guys, and I think you've correctly called out the little guys. So if it's flash system block storage, we meet the market, and we don't offer promissory notes. We just give you what you need and more.
Yeah.
When it comes to the big cloudy hybridy stuff, we've got that in spades as well. So love to talk to the Acquire team more about that.
Yeah, slight segue there on, however, our expertise and the qualitative positioning of VMware still remains to be very valid in the market. However, if we're looking for options, IBM has a great suite of services that can help us transition away from VMware. Either way, the customer is getting the best of breed services.
100%.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Thank you, everyone. Thanks for joining.
No more questions. Thank you. Thanks, Alan. Bye-bye.